This isn't just a podcast. It's a reckoning, a calling, a return to what's real, to what's right, to what's yours. Because somewhere along the way, leadership became a game of sacrifice. Success became a cage. And legacy? Something you leave behind instead of something you live right now. The modern culture is here to change that. This is where the old rules crumble and something truer, deeper, and far more powerful takes their place. Where leadership is about presence, where success is aligned, and where legacy lives in every moment you choose to lead differently. Co-hosted by Cari, Kenzie, and Leah Rowling. This is the place where fire meets flow, where strategy bows to wisdom, and where disruption isn't feared, it's embraced. If you're ready to build without burnout, to create without compromise, to lead in a way that feels like you, welcome to modern culture.
And that's the moment that I realized my team actually never questioned me when I was leading from fear. They questioned me when I started leading from love. Welcome to the modern culture, where we tell the truth about leadership. Not the shiny version, but the real version. Hi, you guys. I'm Cari, Kenzie, and together with Leah Rowling, we are here to reimagine leadership from the inside out. This podcast isn't about doing more. It is about doing it differently. We do it through love, courage, curiosity, and the kind of presence that changes absolutely everything. Today, we are going to start where it all begins. And it is not with the perfect why, my friends. It is in the compounding interest of purpose. Because for so many of us, it did not come in that single lightning bolt moment. It came slowly. It was in every unspoken moment, in the personal shifts, and quite honestly, the hard-earned clarity. So in this episode, Leah and I are sharing the stories that shaped our leadership, the lessons that called us forward, and the deeper why behind this movement that we call the modern culture. Because just like our purpose, this mission was never meant to be built alone. You guys are here. You are part of it. So let's get into the conversation, shall we?
It's wild, isn't it? How we so rarely question when we lead with control or distance. But when we bring love, when we bring vulnerability into the room, and suddenly it's, are you okay? Or what changed? That moment you just shared, Cari, it's one that I think a lot of us feel, but we haven't yet put words to. Because the truth is most of us weren't taught, right? That purpose could be layered, slow, messy, lived.
Yeah.
We were taught to have a pitch. We were taught to have a headline. We were taught to have this very polished why. Like, what do they say? Your why has to be greater than your excuses. This is the things that they say. And in the event that you still excuse your life, you then question and shame that your why isn't profound enough. It's not big enough. But that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what shapes who we are. That's not what shapes cultures. That's not what shapes our legacy. And honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons that we created this space. This is one of the biggest reasons that we created the modern culture, to invite people into leadership that's lived, that's evolving, that's human, right? So if you're listening right now and you've ever felt like you should have, in air quotes over here, figured it all out, we call it shoulding on yourself. And that's with an LD, not a T. Or like your story didn't quite fit the mold, as if your life should have looked different in some way, somehow, that your parents should have been different, your siblings should have been different, you should have had a more successful high school career, and you should have gotten the college of your choice and married the love of your life and had children and retire, and right, like all of that, the way that it works in a world where it should, and then all is right in the world, then this episode is especially for you. You did not. Me and Cari are here to tell you that you did not miss your moment. You did not. It's been compounding all along. And what if we were to tell you that your purpose, right? Your real purpose, right, isn't something that you find. It's something that you remember. right? That deep down, you've always known who you're meant to be. But the noises of the world and the expectations of your family and the authority of academics, right, dimmed your voice and diluted your power, right? And so right now we are standing at a crossroads in humanity where we believe that the modern culture, what we're going to bring forward with clarity and courage and conscious leadership, are no longer optional. They are necessary. We don't need more followers, friends. We need leaders. The modern culture doesn't teach leadership. It trains leaders. And that's what we get to do in this podcast. Not leaders that hold titles, but those that hold truth. And so we want to believe that this is more than a podcast, that this is a movement. It's a reawakening. It's a remembering. An invitation to rise, not just as individuals, but as a unified force. We believe that you were born for this. And if you feel it in your bones, welcome. This first episode, welcome, and welcome to the modern culture.
Oh my gosh, Leah. You know, I love the way that you say that too, even around modern culture in and of itself. I was having that conversation with somebody on our team in the why of modern culture, because we were having this conversation around that compounded interest of purpose and the fact that I have a very hard time with that single sourced why, because that single sourced why, when we're looking for that, I think brings forward a sense of imposter. I think brings forward a sense of I've missed out. I don't know enough. I haven't arrived. I don't have enough information. And it can really set you on your heels, quite honestly, because when you don't have that single sourced why, you effort to put something together that you feel like will fit the narrative of what somebody else is looking for. And then it never feels aligned. It never feels purposeful for you. And then you become lost within the essence of what that is, right? With the holistic version of your purpose, of your truth is. And so when we were having the conversation, he asked me, he said, so then do you see modern culture having a why? And I said, I believe it's a compounded interest. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that modern culture has one. I believe that it has been a collection of everybody who's come forward and aligned in bringing this movement forward. Every single one has a beautiful trail of dots, of experiences, of moments in their past that have led them right here, right to this experience. And it doesn't matter how we have communicated over the course of the past year, what it is that we knew needed to be brought forward. They found themselves in it in some particular way because it so resounded with their own truth and their own purpose, which then I believe just brings deepness, breadth, life, and experience to the holistic why of modern culture. And so that I push out into the world as we have this conversation as what then could be your own collection? What then could be your own like trail of experiences that have brought you into this moment? I tell you, I continue to find them. I continue to find them. Oh my gosh, that's why I experienced that. That's why I went through that. Okay. Because that helps to build the foundation even further of that purpose. And I think truly that we do a disservice when we ask people for, tell me your why. Because I cut you short of the entirety of the humanity that you truly are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts? When you look at why, Leah, what does that look like for you?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we talk about when we talk about purpose, is that for decades, like I know I had been chasing for, like as if it was something outside of me, to find it outside of myself. And all of the purpose-driven language suggests that the drive to find it, right? You're purpose-driven, meaning I'm going to find it, I'm chasing it. Like maybe it's down this path, and maybe if I turn right here, or maybe left at this landmark, it's going to be there. And we try to find it in books, and we try to find it in tests, right? By answering like questions about what are the things that we like, and like what sets your hair on fire, and what are you truly passionate about, as if life itself isn't enough. And so like what we've come full circle is that you are the purpose. Now, how will you lead with it? How will you lead yourself in it? And we term it purpose oriented, because it orients into you. It orients into who you are and how you show up in the world. And so the search is over, friends. The search is over. You just get to proclaim whatever it is. And I think a single why limits, to your point, right? Limits the expansion of not only who we've been, but who we can become.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say to that. But when we think about this compounding interest of purpose, and we've got leaders of the world listening to this, why does it matter? Why do we start this one first episode with that? And what happens when we don't?
Start with purpose. The conference I was at last week, this is because you and I've talked about this numerous times over the course of the past few days, right? The conference I was at last week, a woman came forward and she made a comment that kind of stuck with me. And we've turned the phrase just a little bit, right? She said, people don't buy your product, they buy your purpose. And then we sat back and we were like, but do they buy your purpose, or that buy further into their own, right? Like an amplification of their own purpose. And so for me to look at this very first episode, that shaping of you, that shaping of the collection of humans that you have within an organization, or that you have within your sphere, help to amplify that purpose, should you allow it to do so. Should you allow that purpose to be a living, breathing experience, right? And when we talk about modern culture is not a system. It is not a strategy. It is a movement. It is a movement. And it is a movement to bring people back home to themselves in an understanding that they have absolutely everything that they need to be the leaders, to be the humans that we so desire and we so need in this world. And so when I sit and I've looked back at that why, and I went back to my room, because this really kind of like came forward. I went back to my room and I started typing out on my computer. I was like, there is not one why. I was so frustrated because people are in this room. They're like, tell me your why. And you share a why. I can give you a moment, right? I can give you a why. And in the past, I probably would have said it was the Boston Marathon, right? The experience I had at the finish line in 2013. There's an amazing why that sits there. Oh my God, that's not even close to being a why. It was all the stuff that was around it. It was the things that came after it. It was the fact that when I started to understand and know the things that we are now bringing forward to teach, people questioned me because they were like, I'm sorry, what is your intention? What are you trying to get out of me? I shifted out of leading from fear into leading from love, and they did not know what to do with it. And then literally 2 months ago, if that, I was having this conversation with another podcast I'm going to be on, and he asked me, and he goes, well, so how did they react when you started leading from fear? And I said, you know what? They never did. They never reacted from that, because that's just an expectation. That's just kind of how the world operates. They question when people start leading from love. Because then that is like, whoa, you must want something from me, right? Like you must want so I started writing out this multiplication, I use Leah's language, you guys, just so you know, I do not talk in financial, economic, mathematical, any terms whatsoever. Even Leah was like, more gently like, oh my God, did you just say compounding interest? I was like, yeah, I totally did. You're rubbing off on me. But the one that really came, and then I want to hear so much more from you, Leah, but the one that really came that stuck, that I shared with a gal at the conference, that I have shared with you multiple times, is really in that shared purpose, in the amplification of purpose through a collective voice, not through a single voice, but through a collective voice. And it's that experience I had with a client when she was sharing with me how very upset she was with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she was so upset with her because she had not retired. She didn't retire. She stayed on the bench. She had an opportunity to, she didn't. She stayed on the bench and she ended up passing away. And this woman was so infuriated with her. She said, because if she had retired, we could have had somebody else put on the bench, but we didn't. And the person who was put on the bench has done all of these things to renege on women's rights and right. And she just kind of went into this whole narrative. And I sat and I looked at her and I said, it just, you know how things just pop out. I went, she did it on purpose. She's like, what? And I go, she did it on purpose because she could no longer be the voice. She could no longer be the only one. It had to be a collective. It had to be the collective voice. And I think that when we start looking at why, when we start looking at purpose, it is a collective voice of your own experiences, a collective voice of those around you that then help to amplify everything forward. And that's become the collective voice of modern culture. How about you, Leah?
Well, no, I mean, I think as leaders that care tremendously about whatever it is that they're leading, whether it's their family, whether it's their life, whether it's their team, whether it's a multi-billion-dollar organization or a sports team and anywhere in between, right? There is an outcome, right, that you care tremendously about. Right? For you, it might be your own joy, your own fulfillment, your own level of health, and your own level of connections, your own growth. If it's for your family, it's that they feel empowered and they feel heard and they feel autonomous and they feel loved and they're inspired and they're supported. Whatever it is, there is an outcome there. And the way I believe what you're bringing forward in your brilliance, the way that we get that outcome in any way, again, whatever you're leading, is to persuade via purpose. It's to understand not just your purpose, but what their purpose is and connect by way of language to it. And that is that shared collective voice. It's understanding what motivates them, what drives them, in order so that you can help support them navigate in it. And that's no different for you talking to you, right? How do you persuade yourself in purpose? How do you persuade your family in purpose? How do you persuade your teams in purpose? And when we don't do that, when we try to get to the outcome without the full breadth of understanding, without the full breadth of curiosity, without the full breadth of just appreciation for what got us here, right? Then there's this level of urgency to get someplace without a full comprehension and compassion for what is required. And it doesn't lead to the results typically that people want. And we've recognized this in organizations that we get to coach around, that it all falls back on that. Where, and maybe that it could have just always have been as simple as, where has the collective voice, the collective conversation gone silent? Where is it just one voice trying to manically do all of it and put out all the fires and And instead of bringing forward, right, a collection of conversation in order for a collective purpose.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know. So what would be the question that they could ask themselves if they were going to be bold and they were going to be disruptive and they care, because I know they do, right, about what's next for them? What would be the question that you would ask them to bring any sort of awareness to whether or not they are being isolated in their own purpose, trying to drive tirelessly, or they are open to inviting a collective conscious of conversation to drive same purpose? What would be the question?
I think the first question around just the question lies within the conversation, quite honestly. Question lies in the conversation, because when you talk about, where is it that you are looking at that one purpose and driving that forward, as opposed to looking at the collective purpose, then the question always comes back home to the self of, where is it that you have limited yourself in the definition of that one person for you, of that one voice within you, right? Where are you maybe not seeing the bigger picture of everything it is that you truly have to offer, right? Because when you begin to look at the broader, and I will say just within our own organization, right? When you start to really understand that, yes, there is this path, right? There is this path. Modern culture, whatever organization you have, there is a path, right? But if I am going to limit the purpose, the why in that path to that one thing, right? Where are we missing opportunity? Where are we missing opportunity because we have determined it to be a why, a purpose, right? That one perfect thing that everybody's looking for. Sometimes you need to allow the messy of the conversation, the messy of, tell me, where are you at in this, right? Are you feeling aligned in this? Is there a space in this that I'm not seeing, right? Is there something else? I mean, there's moments that are going to pop forward that you didn't even realize were part of the path. Are you open to seeing those? So really I think that's the first and foremost question is, are we defining too closely into a single source why for yourself or for your organization? Because when you do that, it doesn't allow the opportunity for everybody else's to come into play. Does that make sense? And I don't know if that answers really the question that you're looking for, but that's what I would say. Like, where are we? I'll use myself as an example again. Like, I spent so much time focused in on that one why, on that one moment, on that one experience, that I missed so much opportunity. So much opportunity. Because I hadn't allowed myself to expand out. I hadn't allowed myself to see a fuller breadth, right? Which then allowed me to go, whoa, this is so much bigger. This is so much more amazing. This is so much more collaborative than I ever thought it possibly could be. I mean, we've stepped into organizations, and one of the organizations we're working with right now, she's looking at that mission, she's looking at that purpose, but she's allowing it to breathe. And all of a sudden she's like, I didn't realize that it would make complete sense to pull this whole other segment into the organization, because it just amplifies us up and forward. I was so focused in on that one. Of me.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Well, because we talk a lot about the human brain and why it is that we do what we do, and why it is also that we don't do what we know. But what was coming to me is another line of questioning can be, what's the worst thing that could happen if you allow your voice to be shared? Right? And if you don't judge it, what would come up. And I know for me, what would come up is then my voice would be weakened. It would be silenced. There is a potential that
Okay.
other voices, right, could be louder and could diminish that voice. Well, then what do we make that mean? And if that voice is diminished, then if we don't have a voice and you don't get to speak, and then why do you bother? And then et cetera, almost to the point where we equate then our worth to our voice. And so what do we make it mean when we have to share our voice? What do we make it mean when there's a collection, a collaboration of voice? Do we make it mean that it's not ours? Do we make it mean that what we had come up with isn't as important? Do we make it mean that other people's is more important? And what are you willing to risk? Right? Which is always just an interpretation of what you make it mean. That's the only risk ever. In order for you to truly step into the collective purpose, the collection of all the whys, the collection of all the data points, all of the experiences that allow this purpose, whatever it be. And I hope you have one as we have this conversation. And if you don't, and you just got one now, then go back and listen with that in mind, because otherwise this podcast might not make a lot of sense, right? But if you had it in mind, where are you limiting that purpose to you? Where are you limiting that purpose to just your voice and your own knowing and your level of certainty and your level of control and your one why that you were told to have?
Yep.
You got to have it. You got to have that elevator pitch. You got to have that, because otherwise who will know who you are? Right? And if it was simple, but not maybe easy. Like, I think that's the easy path, right? I think that's the easy path. If you have that one why, you're golden, you're solid, as opposed to just allowing for the discomfort, if you will, of allowing it to be an aggregate. Because then you don't have your nice little neat statement of why. When somebody asks you, what's your why? Well, this is my why. What's your why? Like, can we have deeper, even level conversations than that?
I was going to say, doesn't that feel kind of like a one-up?
Yeah.
Like, that's your why. Here's my why.
Yeah.
Right? And then what do you get out of that?
Yeah.
You get a practice statement.
Yeah.
I get a practice statement.
Yeah. I get a practice statement. So next time I'm in an elevator, I can rehearse it again.
It's the worst. Oh, Leah, can we just
bring us home?
Times? I mean, we just need to shed the whole thing.
Yeah.
We have to shed the whole thing, because when you allow it to breathe, it continues to grow. When you allow collaboration, when you embrace collaboration, really as almost like a superpower, everything expands exponentially, because that's where people find themselves in that purpose as part of their own, right? As part of their own. So that out of all of this, when somebody asks the purpose, the why behind modern culture, I think forever and forever forward, it's going to be, it is a continually moving, breathing organism, right? That amplifies the purpose of itself and amplifies the purpose in everybody else, to be that collective voice, So then permission would be, please don't feel like you have to have a particular single why. Understand and know that it can be compounding. Give yourself the space to allow all of those moments and experiences to come forward for you, to be able to share themselves within you. So then you have the ability to be able to embrace whatever part of the story wants to reveal itself to you right now, because that is your growth. That is the next step. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share this with you. If you found it helpful or interesting, we'd love it if you'd share it with other people. Bring others along into this movement and into this mission, because we love you and we would love to have them as part of it. We'll be talking about the principles, leadership principles, coming up in the next episodes you don't want to miss. So, my friends, until next week, make it a great one.
You've been listening to Modern Culture, co-hosted by Leah Rowling and Cari Kenzie. This is a space where fire meets flow, where strategy bows to wisdom, and where disruption isn't feared, it's embraced. Tune in every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Transformation Network. Because this isn't just a podcast, it's a reckoning, a calling, a return.